how could you possibly say that? How could you possibly do that? And they don't want to, there might be something in their life that they're really hiding that they couldn't reveal. But integrity says, this is who I am, and this is what I do. Welcome to the Pillars Podcast. I'm Harry.
And I'm Carson.
If you're ready to confront life's challenges and become the man you're meant to be,
you found your tribe. Now let's dive in.
Let's join the conversation. Well, here we are, back for another session of what it means to be a real man here with the Pillars. And the last time we talked about what the definition of a real man is, about having responsibility, resisting passivity, leading with courage, and accepting the greater reward, and then having a king to serve.
Right.
Courage, we're going to talk a little bit now about what it really means to be the character of a man. Why is it so important to have certain things as character of a man? So we're going to look into that and identify some of these things that are really key, like having integrity.
Right.
Courage is one of the things we talk about is really important. And then the humility. So we want to kind of dive into some of those things as we go.
I think
talk today.
Humility is such a hard one because at what age? How do you even describe that?
Humility, being humble. I think it's such a very, very key thing to learn. Humility is how we are raised and what we're taught. Because if in our society we are not really, would you say we're taught to be humble? Is humble is one of the things.
It's like the most prideful society.
Absolutely. I think about, here we are in America, right? And we always talk about, we never lose, we're proud, we really bolster up who we are as Americans. And, in one way we want to have some pride about that, but in another way, if we apply that to us personally as individuals, as people, because that's a institution that you're holding up as a great institution, right? But when we look at ourselves and we have this whole idea that we are so much better than others, it separates us. And the truth is, a lot of it is bolstering, right? Mm-hmm. And we learn that through our examples. And the examples that we learn is through our parents, how we're being raised. And I think that's a key thing to pay attention to. It's so easy to be told to be the best, greatest.
And the opposite of humility is pride. Mm-hmm. And what do you and I both know about pride?
Yeah, that is destructive.
It's just destructive.
Yeah. So here's the definition about humility that I think is very important to pay attention to, because when people think about humility, they must think, I just got to put my head down, I got to take everything. But humility really is just simply thinking of yourself in the right way, in the right place, putting yourself in the right place. If you walk into a place and the president of your company is there, would you walk in like you're the president of the company?
No.
You wouldn't.
You'd look like a fool.
You'd look like a fool because you're not the president of the company. Yeah. But if you walk in just simply as the employee that you are, maybe you're a manager. And you walk in as a manager, and you take the fullness of being a manager, right? I'm a manager. If you're the vice president, you take the fullness and you respond in the way of just being the vice president. Mm-hmm. Being humble is just simply being in your place where you're supposed to be. And when Scripture talks about us humbling ourselves before God, it just put ourselves in the right place.
Yeah,
and He will lift us up. He will raise us up into a place that is even more elevated, but elevated in a place that, okay, this is where now I am. And being in that place then requires you to be responsible to that level of where you are.
I think such an easy example for people that are closer to my age is like being humble. Like you said, it's knowing your kind of like your place.
Yeah.
Right. That's like a student. A student just knowing their place as a student, learning from their teacher.
Yeah.
You show up, and that sense of humility is you don't interrupt your teacher and you Don't ask stupid questions.
Uh, have you ever? I've been in the college and college courses, and of course, there are a lot of guys in college courses who believe they know a whole lot, and when we're kind of at that age, students, we think we know a whole lot, and so the teacher is trying to teach us something, and the kids in the class who, they're smart kids,
right?
But the way that they present themselves to the teacher and make as if I know, and I don't think this is, and the teacher's taught for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And has this freshman coming into class like he knows it. This happened to me. I was in graduate school, and I had a professor who was talking on economics, and his way of talking about economics with von Mises and all these, it was very heady and very, very kind of cerebral and detailed, and you just don't understand it from just saying one thing. There's a whole system.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm in a narrow mind thinking, oh, that couldn't be because of this, that, and so on. By the end of the class, I reflected back on the beginning of the class and realized how ignorant I was, how I did not know anything about what economics was all about.
Yeah.
And he systematically took me through that. But it would have been easier for me to adapt it had I just paid attention to the process that he's leading into. So that humility is just like finding your right place. So that was my experience with it.
So we talked about humility, responsibility, courage. But what more about courage? Because I think for me, like being my age, a small example of courage is like, a lot of my friends, partying is like huge right now for people my age.
Yeah, of course.
And there's a lot of times where I'm just thinking an example for me is where I have to have some leadership and be courageous and say no.
Yeah.
And I may get judgment or lash back or whatever, but I always know when I make that decision, there's so much, it has such a greater effect on me.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about that before. I remember in some conversations about being enticed to go places and wanting to go, but thinking, oh, I probably shouldn't go that where those people are and what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawns on me the reasons why, I think, in some of the conversations that we had. And correct me if I'm not right in this, but is that sometimes wanting to be fitting in and not being left on the outside?
Yes.
And in order to kind of stay in that place, you'd much rather have that. And it would take a lot of courage to not be in the in group.
Yes. I think that's, for people my age, I think that's usually always the case until you really realize the effects.
Yeah.
That fitting in is really not fitting in.
Yeah.
Because we're fitting into Christ.
Yeah.
Not into the world.
Yeah. And fitting in where it's not where you are, and the not being aware of the consequences. Where we talked about one of the definitions of a real man is accepting the greater reward.
Mm-hmm.
We're fitting in somewhere that doesn't really benefit us. And sometimes, you want to go to the party, you want to do and the group of people that you're going to be hanging out. I was talking to a good buddy of mine last night, and he was saying, man, if you knew me when I was younger, you wouldn't recognize me. And he was explaining that he would go out with his friends, and he'd have 13 beers.
Wow.
And I'm like, what?
The record.
And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, really? No, I don't believe. He goes, man, I do. My friends would love for me to go with them, but they didn't want to take me home at the end of the night. And that whole idea for him to go and do that was because he wanted to fit in, be with the crowd, be with these people. And took a lot of courage for him to go, I'm not going to do that because it's ruining my life.
Right.
And I won't be a part of the in crowd.
Yeah.
And it takes courage to decide, when we talk about leading with courage, being a courageous leader, a leader will go somewhere where somebody's not and hope that other people will follow if they're doing
That's so true. Because nobody wants to be where Nobody wants to be on the other side of things
Exactly.
unless there's a strength of pillar
Yeah.
that they want to follow.
Yeah.
On the
Especially at that age, at that juncture, because a lot of times you don't see into the future. You just see what is right
right
now.
in front of you.
And, oh my gosh, they don't like me. I'm not in the group. I don't have the friends. They're not inviting me. But when I go, I'm doing all the things that I probably shouldn't do that aren't really helping me. And you got to be courageous in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing about the character of a real man has to do with integrity. Integrity is a big
Huge.
thing.
Huge.
And I know that the friends that I like in my life that I really want to align myself up with are men of character, because and who have that integrity in their character. And that integrity, it also has elements of a whole lot of other. The integrity has elements of humility in it,
Right.
because this is just who I am, and they're not trying to put something out that is not what is real.
But what is integrity?
Integrity, we hear the definition.
Just people just say being a good person when no one's looking.
Yes, exactly. That would doing the right thing when no one's looking. It's easy to do the right thing when somebody's looking. Well, somebody's going to be looking. Okay, so I'll do the right.
Yeah.
But when eyes aren't on us, and we know this is the right thing to do, even though there's temptation to do everything else, we just go no, because I want to do the right thing. And I think this is important to realize: we're not perfect people. There's one thing I always try to instill in the young men that I work with, is this understanding. I don't expect you to be a perfect person.
You sure about that?
Yeah, I'm clearly sure about that. And I even try to let them know the mistakes that I make in my life, so they're very clear. I just happen to have moved on in life and learned some other things, but that doesn't mean that I'm different than you. And I'm not doing that anymore, because I banged my head up against the wall long enough and I figured it out. Like, I'm not going to keep doing that anymore. But there are still things that I do. But the thing is, integrity is able to say, hey, I blew it.
Yeah.
I want to do the right thing. And if you don't have integrity, you blow it, and all you'll do is hide all the time.
Yeah.
You don't want to hide.
And one of those elements is, like you said, is taking ownership.
Yeah.
You're taking ownership in that.
It's being responsible.
That is like being a courageous leader as well, because nobody wants to take ownership of their mistakes.
I'm thinking of my grandson. He'll be at home, and he'll want the cookies or the potato chips, and it's in the pantry. And it's so funny how you think you're getting away with stuff and you're hiding. And I can see him walking into the pantry and shutting the door, and
Quiet.
hear the little crinkling sounds of it. And you open the door, and he turns and looks at you like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I was just looking." And we think we're getting away with it.
Yeah.
But in our lives, we're never really going to get away. Be sure your transgressions are going to find you out. They're going to find you. And that's why it's important to be integrous. Because if you're integrous, whatever is going to be found out, nobody's going to go, "Oh, I didn't know that about you. Oh my gosh." Yeah. No, this is, I've lived the life of a pastor, and I worked in the corporate world, and then came into the church world and worked as a pastor. And in the corporate world, I had the opportunity to work a lot with people, just all kinds of people. But because of my faith and what I believe, I just kind of lived it out and shared with people all the time, where I'm at. And I remember, well, I'll tell you that story later. But when I came into the church, one of the things that I think people in the church really want to see, they want to see someone really wonderful.
Right.
And they put you on a pedestal. In the church, you're easily, the people that that are in the congregation are very easily and capable and willing to put a pastor up on a pedestal. Yeah. And I've always realized that one of the hardest things that I have to do, or one of the most diligent things that I have to do as a pastor, is to deconstruct the pedestal that people want to put me on.
Yes.
Because,
wow,
they'll see me up in front. They'll go, "Oh, if I can only live a life like you and be like you," and they think now that there's this difference. And what I want him to know is like, I have to trust Jesus just as much as you have to.
Yeah.
I have to recognize that with him, it's so very, very important that I give him the truth. And I want you to know the truth, that it's a daily walk. It's always a walk with him. And we're equally in this place of needing to be dependent upon him. And to be able to have that kind of integrity allows people to really kind of have a connection with the person that they're engaging with without this falseness.
Right. How did you deal with that? Like you said, how did you
Well, I
relate that to
learned
people?
you can't tell everybody everything based upon what they can handle.
Mm.
You know, there's you gotta give them what they can handle in a way, and based up kind of, I would say, based upon their ability to embrace the truths about themselves. You know, if we're able to really understand,
But not everybody has that ability.
not everybody has it. They expect, I'm going to put on a good face and I have to look like this.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to tell them, hey, well, this is not true. This is how I respond to some things. How could you possibly say that? How could you possibly do that? And they don't want to, there might be something in their life that they're really hiding that they couldn't reveal. But integrity says, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I do. And if you're wanting to be a real man and responsible, then you're gonna be as true as you possibly can, because you're actually going to grow. There's going to be some accountability in your behavior, right?
How do you, like, what does integrity look like at a young age? You know, because for me, I'm just thinking at my age, integrity looks like what we talked about. Obviously, doing the right thing when nobody's looking, because ultimately God is looking, and that's how we have to think. For me, it just looks like I used to struggle with like smoking, and then you would like do that alone, and you realize it's cowardly, and like, I'm doing this alone, and and now every time I go to do that, I just think God's watching me. I'm going to be a coward if I do this. Like, what I'm saying is, how do you instill that in somebody? That integrity, because I know how it feels for myself, but I don't know how it feels for others and what that looks like.
So when you think about smoking, what is it that you feel about smoking?
I feel like others look at me as less.
Are you?
No, but my example to others, yes.
So what is the example that matters the most?
The Christ-like example.
So does smoking depict that you're not Christ-like?
I think in my own mind, yes. I'm hypercritical.
Yeah. So maybe we're running out of time for today's session, but just to in regards to integrity is wanting to walk in the right way.
Right.
And sometimes if we misconstrue what is actually the most right way, like as far as what you're referring to as what is moral and what would be right in a moral way, sometimes we put into what is moral things that aren't moral. And then we kind of want to hide those things, and hiding those things don't matter one way morally, but then the moral issue becomes, I think it's something that I'm going to hide.
Got it.
And then that becomes the falseness rather than.
Got it, yeah.
I struggle with this. I mean, it's not going to lead you. It'll lead you maybe quicker to physical death, but it's not going to lead you to spiritual death.
Spiritual death.
Yeah. So I love these conversations that we have, to be able to talk about these things, because these are going to be real things. And we're going to follow up next week. Next time we'll talk about a little more of those things about what it means to be a real man. Love these conversations with you.
Thank you for having me.